Doom Eternal is one of the most satisfying games ever made, and a lot of that comes from the upgrades that make things go faster and feel better. But what if we tried to beat the entire campaign without getting a single upgrade? And what if we were to do it on Nightmare, because I'm not no baby? Is the game even possible without upgrades? Let's see what kind of shenanigans we can get up to today. So starting off the game, there isn't really anything more difficult than normal, and mostly this is just because you're not expected to have any upgrades at this point either. So because of that, we're going to be moving at a pretty quick pace, and we're going to be using a number of speedrun tricks, because if you guys didn't know, I am actually a speedrunner of this game. Not a particularly good speedrunner, but I do know a lot of the tricks. So we start off by taking sticky bombs. I'm considering this an additional weapon, not really a upgrade to the weapon. Because I mean, think about it, is a grenade launcher really the same thing as a shotgun? It's not any kind of upgrade to a shotgun, it's just a new weapon. On top of that, Doom actually has a milestone for only taking 1 Sentinel upgrade and 1 Praetor suit point, so we're going to be following those rules for what counts as an upgrade. But getting back to the room we're in, this one is pretty simple. You just have to kill 16 enemies, which spawns 1 more imp at the end, and once you kill him, then you're able to leave the room. Now at this point I'm going to be using one of these common speed techs that we use, which is called bunny hopping. This is a pretty common thing across minigames. Basically you just keep all of your speed whenever you hit the ground and jump on the same frame. But in this game you actually gain speed by hitting the ground really hard, because it gives you a little lurch, and that lurch actually gives you forward speed that you can keep if you hit the bunny hop. So with this we're ready to move on to the next area, and for some reason I grabbed this collectible and then proceed to have a complete meltdown on this ledge for some reason. This bodes well for the rest of the run. Now as we approach this area, we're actually going to be skipping it using something called a punch boost. Since we're still at a point where there are literally no upgrades, I really don't care about the integrity of like doing all the fights and stuff like that. And regardless, all we have to do is beat the game. We don't have to beat every part of the game. So all we have to do is lure this zombie over to the edge here. I'm kind of getting trolled by these enemies, but it's alright, I'm doing a decent job of dodging the shots, and we are able to pull off the punch boost. Basically this works whenever you have an enemy above you, and some bit of ground partially in your way of hitting the enemy. It'll allow you to cancel the punch, which actually lets you keep all of the speed from the lunge. And now we could chainsaw this guy and do another punch boost on his turret, which for some reason has its own collision, and we're able to just fly around here for an extremely effective speed tech that saves like, I don't know, 5 seconds. All you have to do is kill 3 guys that get one-shotted. But hey, it looked really cool. And now we're arriving at the second mod bot, and we're going to be picking up the Precision Bolt. If you guys don't know, the Precision Bolt is basically a sniper rifle, and it is basically the best weapon in the entire game. At least once you know how to use it. And on the way out, we pick up the Frag Launcher, which is once again a new ability and not an upgrade. That said, there are upgrades for it that we won't be taking. Here we have a fight that is kind of a dull one. You start off with this Caco, and then you just get a bunch of random fodder spawns, and later on you get a spider, but now we have enough weapons for that to be easy. So just to keep up the pace of the video, I'm going to go ahead and grab this fuel and move on to the next fight. So this is just a bit of a transition area, so we're just going to grab the rest of the ammo and then hop into the real fight, which is up here. So this route, I basically just go for the speedrun route, and I kind of get it, but I do it really sloppily. Basically, you just want to kill all these fodders while running over the fuel there, and then running towards the Cacos, and then basically you want to just feed them both grenades and get glory kills on them. But I kind of mess it up, and just do whatever you want to call this. But regardless, we are able to get through it, and since it isn't a speedrun, I'm not really that worried about not hitting the strat perfectly anyway. Once we kill these 2 Cacos, it's going to spawn a spider beneath us, so I go for the triple chainsaw on him so I don't have to deal with him. And now we just need to clear out 1 more Caco before we can leave the room. So we just feed him some vegetables and hop on over and give him a nice glory kill. After that, we just have a couple of imps to clean up, and then we're ready to move on. I went ahead and skipped the cutscene for you guys just because I love you. And this fight is honestly even easier than the last one. All we have to do is clear these guys on this side of the wall. And once we take out all the fodder out here, it's going to spawn 2 more in the hallway here. And we're going to go for a chainsaw on one of them because we're now low on ammo and we have to get one. And now we're ready to move on to the next part, which has a spider in it and some more fodder. And I should have taken out the spider's turret here because it was kind of hitting me occasionally, but I ended up dodging the shots well enough and was able to survive and make it to the end of the level. So I just throw all my stuff at the spider and then clean up the last 2 imps, and we are out of here. And now back in the fortress after that mission, we're able to grab the Flame Belch, which is an absolutely amazing ability, and this is where the run comes to an end, unfortunately. You are completely required to take this crystal, and there is no way around it. I tried a bunch of ways, like canceling it with Alt F4 or main menuing, but nothing lets you continue until you take that crystal, so I just take the first one that I normally would have, and to be fair, armor is probably the weakest one we could have gotten anyway, but I know you guys didn't want to see the run end here, so of course we're going to keep going. And this is the only upgrade we will get for the entire run. It's sad, but we can go ahead and get into Exaltia now. So onto the first fight of Exaltia. This one is a pretty simple small encounter. Pretty much I already know where all these guys spawn, so I just sit on where they're going to spawn and then immediately kill them. And I give this guy a grenade while killing everything during his animation, although I do kind of let an imp kick my ass, so that's unfortunate. But now we just have the last two zombies that are chilling over here. And I spend way too long waiting for the zombie just to realize he's in a glory kill. Now we're ready to move on to the area before the first rune, and with this rune we are going to be taking air control. I know that some people might consider runes to be a upgrade, but since that milestone doesn't include them, and also a lot of the runes are just new abilities, and also I'm pretty sure this game is just completely unplayable without air control, we go ahead and take runes for the run, and trust me, the run gets hard enough anyway as it is. So now we can hop into this next room where we're going to deal with a Hell Knight just after taking down a couple of soldiers. So here I'm just trying to get him away from the scary spot and start lobbing grenades at him. In the early game, one of the best sources of damage is hitting these sticky bombs on the head, which turns them blue and does ridiculous damage. It's called a sticky crit, and also we mix in a blood punch just to take him out. And now we're running into the next encounter here. This first Kako in the doorway is technically optional, but he's kind of dangerous, so we're still going to take him out. I also like to just lob a frag here because it helps take out some of the fodder, and this Kako spawns pretty quickly, and basically we're going to feed them both grenades, and because we've now put the other one into a glory kill twice, we can just snipe him and glory kill this one really quickly, and that is going to spawn the third Kako here, which we can just take out real quick with a glory kill, and we set up in the speedrunner spot to finish off the encounter fast by shooting some grenades here and chainsawing this dude. But I missed one of the grenade shots, so now I have to go and clean up the imp, but I was at least able to stun him, so it was nice and easy. And with this arena out of the way, we can go ahead and move on to the next. So at this point we just got the dash ability, but I cut that out because it was just boring movement and not really any different from this challenge. And that puts us back in this room with a new set of enemies. So because I know where this Hell Knight spawns, I can do a move like that to get a bunch of damage off on him before he can move. And then we feed this Kako his vegetables and clean up the soldier over there. Then from here we're just going to have one more fodder spawn and a Hell Knight which is running out of the door at us. But I'm going to go take some time and grab the fuel here so that we can use it in the next encounter. And after coming into hell, I immediately go into my menus and almost fail the challenge by upgrading my shotgun, but I remember that I am playing a run with no upgrades and probably shouldn't do that. So if you sit back on these stairs here, you can actually pick off these fodder before spawning the Revenant in on the right, which I like to do just to be safe since it's not a speedrun anyway, and because this moron jumps onto a barrel, you can take him out really fast. Then you'll see we hop over a fuel can and are able to chainsaw this Hell Knight, as well as blowing up that group on the barrel and then feeding this guy a grenade to get him into a glory kill. This is basically just my speedrun route once again, but we are still in the early game, which means that everything is kind of easy right now. But once we get a few missions deeper, things are going to start ramping up really fast. And at this point, I've cleared out everything, but I just lost a fodder somewhere, and I have no idea where he is. And now I'm going to make you watch in frustration as I do nothing waiting for him to come to me. And now that we're done with that, I figured I would go ahead and show you guys this skip just because basically anybody can do it, and it just lets you avoid the goo here, which is super nice. And with this mob bat, we're going to be picking up Heat Blast, which is actually a really big deal for the early game, because it is such a big source of burst damage before we have stuff like the rocket launcher and the super shotgun. So at this point I cut and I already have a Heat Blast built up, and I try to blast through this wall but go a little bit too fast and smash my face into it. Regardless, we're going to hop down and dump some PB shots into this spider, and then once he goes down we're going to go after the Revenant with our Heat Blast. But we're actually going to do a bit of a special trick on him to get some extra damage out of it. Basically, if you swap off of the plasma rifle while you're still firing it, and press Heat Blast in that animation, you'll get a bunch of Heat Blasts all at once for whatever reason. So I go ahead and do that, and we're able to melt through these guys, as well as the Hell Knight by using the barrel. And you may have noticed during all this, I picked up a third chainsaw fuel, and I'm now able to chainsaw the next heavy I see, which is going to be a spider. I'm also making good use of my flame belch here to stay alive. which is kind of something a lot of people forget to do in this game. In general, you should just be using it on cooldown all the time in fights. And with him down, we're onto the last heavy, and we can give him a nice little yeet blast, and now we have nothing left but fodder to clean up. So here I instinctually went for the secret encounter just because I'm used to 100%ing the game, even though getting weapon points is completely pointless for me. But regardless, it's a pretty easy one. All we have to do is take down these guys with the plasma rifle, and then of course have one of the lost soul corpses land on a barrel and almost kill me. That would have been such an embarrassing way to die for the first time this run. But with that out of the way, we can do some extremely intended parkour here, before moving on to the room with the second Sentinel Crystal of the game. So of course, with this being a no upgrade run, I go ahead and take the ammo upgrade. Wait, I take the ammo upgrade? That can't be right. I take the ammo upgrade, and then realize the error of my ways. But I have a secret trick up my sleeve, and I like to call it the Alt F4 buttons. And just like that, it's like nothing ever happened. I never took that crystal, you're just seeing things. There's the crystal right there, you see, I didn't take it. So, after not having to reset the run because of that, we're ready to move on and do some more very intended parkour. I said very intended parkour. Okay, and now we're on to the final fight of the level, and I'm charging up a heat blast because I forgot to do that before this. But basically, you can kill all of the heavies with the quad damage if you make good use of it. So I go ahead and just do kind of the speedrun route, but because I didn't have a heat blast, I'm a little bit off, but it's okay, we're close enough anyway. So I end up having to take out this spider manually, but it's not really a big deal anyway. Because as I said before, we still aren't really expected to have many upgrades, so this really isn't that hard of a fight. Also, everything decides to bunch up for me, which is just super nice of them, so we're able to finish off the fight here. And now back at the fortress, we can do this super sick stair jump and go towards the battery animation, and I'm just going to make you watch this. That was awesome, right? That has to be one of my favorite animations as a 100% speedrunner. And if you haven't 100% of the game, you probably don't know what I'm talking about, but if you have 100% of the game, then you know that you have to spend 7 minutes watching that animation over and over. But we're moving on to the Repertorium here now, and this is another really easy fight, and I mean, even normally it's really easy, because it's just fodder, and at this point we're already used to fighting several heavies per fight, so I'm not really sure why they made us do this, but regardless, we can go ahead and move on from here. And this is another point where they require us to take an upgrade, but fortunately this one we don't have to actually make any use of, because it's just a point that we can choose not to spend. I believe that the milestone does actually let you spend the one, but I didn't think that was really with the spirit of the challenge, so we don't get any suit upgrades at all. And with that, we're ready to move on to Cultist Base. And if you've ever tried to speedrun this game, or just play it on Ultra Nightmare, you know that this is one of the biggest choke points. In general, it's just a really hard level on higher difficulties, and having to take it on without any upgrades is going to be really tough. So in this first fight, I do decide to just do the Flame Belch thing to get 4 for the challenge, just because I'm used to going for that, although I really didn't need to, but having a giant armor pool is always nice for survivability. Then we hit another Yeet Blast on this guy, and I instinctively go for this battery, fail it, realize I don't need to, and move on. So yeah, just having a lot of thoughts there. Then we just have a bit more incidental combat before going and pressing a button. And now we can move on to the core of this fight. Basically, this fight would be pretty difficult because you don't really have a lot of weapons and you're facing 3 Mancubuses, but you're given this lovely trap that kind of just one-shot everything, so it doesn't end up being that hard if you just sit in the right spots. I hang out back here and snipe off their arms some to make them less dangerous, but I'm really just waiting for them to walk up into the trap before taking them out. From here, we can jump onto this top left corner here, which lets us hop up here, and then heat blast these guys, which lets us start off the encounter really quickly, and it also tends to just lead everything to want to hop up here really fast, so we can go ahead and just take care of it nice and easy. After getting through that, I go for a punch boost here and lose literally all of my health and don't even hit the punch boost correctly, so I'm going to go ahead and take the Armor of Shame now. And with that stuff picked up, we can go ahead and move on to grabbing the rocket launcher before the next combat arena. So now that we're here, I basically am going to go for this Mancubus here, and right away it just feels really wrong doing these swaps without swap speed. Normally getting handling speed is basically the first upgrade you should get in every run, So I literally haven't used the PB and the rocket combo without that before. And unfortunately that does end up getting the better of me. Three times. It gets me 3 times. So not only was that our first death, it was also our second and our third. And we are literally on the 3rd level of the game. It's only going to get worse from here. But for this fight, we have a grab lift that launches us super high in the air and makes it hard for the enemies to hit us. So I'm basically just peppering down splash on all the ads because that's kind of what hurts you the most are the fodder guys. And we hit a nice glory kill with Flame Belch on the Caco demon there to get a bunch of health and armor, and then a chainsaw on the Mancubus, which we were holding on to for this fight specifically. So now with all of our supplies stacked back up, we can finish off the fight. So with that fight over, I'll show you guys a little easy skip to get past the parkour here. A lot of runners go for a dash boost at another spot, but I like just doing it this way, and it's pretty much the same speed. And we are going to be taking Dazed and Confused for our rune now, which basically just makes it so that enemies will sit in the glory kill state for much longer, which is pretty helpful in this run because we end up doing much less damage without the swap speed that we're used to. And after grabbing the mega health in that spot, we're fully stacked up and we're ready to move into the next fight, which is our introduction to the snake enemy, which is one of the worst in the game. But we make use of the speedrun route and it ends up not being too bad. And with that fight out of the way, we can go ahead and stand on this button. In general, I go for chainsaws on the last enemy of fights, just because it's a little bit faster technically in a speedrun, but it really doesn't matter in a setting like this. I'm just used to doing it, so I do it. You'll see we take lock-on burst for the rocket launcher as it is just the vastly superior mod. But without the upgrades, it's much worse than it normally is, and I end up using it less throughout this run than I normally would. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and do some very intended parkour here before moving on to the next arena. So in this spot, we can pop these guys and then take out the Mancubus using the slowest PB rocket combo in history, and then clean up these shield dudes with the plasma rifle and use a heat blast to take out the little crowd there so that I didn't take a bunch of damage. At this point, we're ready to start the second half of the fight, which begins once we take out this Caco. So we're going to take him down with a glory kill and then get ready to start spamming the lock-on burst, since this is basically the arena that it's used as a tutorial for. And basically just all the heavies are ones that get killed by it super quickly, so we use it a lot here. This spider decides to jump up on my face, and because of the slow lock-on speed from the rocket launcher, which I'm not used to, I end up missing him and just go for the sticky crits on this guy instead, which is also something we do in the speedrun, but normally it's where he spawns. But I'm running really far behind because of the slow swap speed already. I mean, just look at how slow it is. It takes forever. And once we get the super shotgun, we're going to be using that a lot more than the rocket launcher, but for now the rocket launcher is our highest burst damage weapon, so we are going to be making some good use of it. Once I see the Mancubus, I know that the fight is about to be over because that is the last heavy that spawns in this fight, and now I just look for any soldiers I might have missed before leaving the arena. But I do end up realizing that I left a Revenant up after I hear him, and we take him out with a nice little lock-on burst before getting ready to attempt the speed tech here. If I dash into the cutscene, I'll get a bunch of speed, but of course I missed the dash timing, so I'll just use the greatest speedrun trick ever I like to call editing. And now we're into the next room, and I freeze these guys and do a bunch of stuff to stack up my health and armor, as well as wasting my blood punch because I want to do a skip here that is completely useless. But it's called Moroccan Spice Chicken with toasted vegetables, so obviously I have to do it. So you just punch this guy and fly into the stratosphere. Pretty normal Doom Guy activities if you ask me, but you know, I don't believe in elevators, what can I say, so obviously I had to do it. But with all that out of the way, we're ready to move on to the pit fight, which is among the worst in the entire game. The main thing that makes it difficult is you're expected to do this with little health anyway, even in the normal game. So honestly, this was nothing compared to what I had to deal with later, where I'm used to having upgrades. So we take these guys out to have a nice armor pool, and then we get to work taking these guys down. Basically, I'm trying to just spawn trap some of these guys, and then I'm going to have to use the plasma rifle on them once they put up their shields. I'm also holding onto these cue balls for now, just because I can use them on the heavies as they spawn, but the cue balls are infinitely respawning. And eventually we're going to have a snake spawn, and he...
Why are you running?
I'm trying to prioritize them because they're scary, and of course they run away and try to just let the fodder shoot me. Freaking hate those guys, man. But now we're on to the second to last part, where this Arachnotron is what continues the fight. So of course a smart man would kill everything else around him and then take him down so that I could have nothing else in the fight. But my speedrunner brain kicked in, and you can guess how that went. But hey, with the power of editing, we can go ahead and try again right away. This time I cue ball that guy properly like I meant to, and I can give this guy a freeze and a cue ball, and we're able to get done with the fight nice and quick now.
Not today, Satan.
So now that we've successfully not taken the Sentinel Crystal, we're ready to move on to the next part, which is going to be the Demon fight, which is completely unchanged in this version. So I'll basically just tell you guys, the quickest way to progress the encounter is to just hard focus the Mancubuses and the Spiders. Everything else is just on a timer. So with him taken out, we're given the Super Shotgun, which is probably the biggest gun of the run. It's our new best form of DPS, and doesn't have very heavy reliance on its mod for doing damage. That being said, its upgrades are still really good, especially the Mastery, but it at least does full damage without them, which is very helpful because the same can be said about most of the other guns. Anyway, we go through this room with the speedrunner strat. At this point, I already memorized where everything spawns in here, so I make good use of the cue balls and kind of have explosives ready for each of the fights that I need them in. Although I do miss this rocket and have to freehand these guys a little bit, but it doesn't end up being too bad. So after skipping some more transition, we can go ahead and skip into the final fight, and I am able to get it done first try, but I think I was pretty lucky. Regardless, I'll just show you guys how I got it done. So with that fight done, we're ready to take on the Doom Hunter base, and that begins on this train here, which normally I would have a triple chainsaw for, but this time I don't because I have to chainsaw so much more often than normal. But yeah, this fight isn't too hard, it's just a bunch of fodder after you take out the initial Mancubus. So I just stack up all I can for the next fight on these guys, and then we're ready to move on to the rest of the base. So we can hop up here using the meat hook, and also spend some more time stacking up on the enemies because the next fight is probably one of the hardest fights in the game normally, although that is once again just because normally you don't have upgrades here, and you do have upgrades later, but obviously that's not going to be the case in this run, so really this fight wasn't too much of anything either. Anyway, we hop in and do a heat blast on that guy because it always filters them, which lets us get an easy super shotgun blast on them, and then from there we just need to take out a handful of fodder before spawning in some revenants. And I decided to go for a lock-on burst on the Revenant once he spawns, just because I kind of have time to set it up. Then I want to turn around and do the same to the other. And I don't quite get the kill because of the slow lock-on speed there, causing me to miss. But from there, we can go look for more heavies to take out. But hey, fortunately with the power of editing, we can get right back to where we left off, which of course was taking out these Revenants. So let's lock-on burst them and then give it another try. And with this combat encounter done and a clean little meat hook out of it, we're ready to finish off the level. And the rest of the level is kind of easy up until the Doom Hunter fight. There really just is a bunch of incidental combat. That's the only real arena of this entire level. So I'll show you guys some of the more interesting points like this one, where we have a bunch of demons which are sitting on floor traps across a large gap from us. I pick away at them with my long range weapons, all the while they're taking damage from the floor traps because demons do take damage from the floor traps. But once I feel like I've done enough, I go ahead and hop over and clean up the rest of them. This fight can be a little bit weird sometimes. It doesn't seem that dangerous, but somehow you just lose a ton of health all the time here. So as per usual, I'm not careful at all, and nearly die several times. But it's okay because this is Doom Eternal, and you can always just immediately stack up your entire health and armor bar off of like 3 enemies. And with that guy down, we can now push this button, and I'm gonna skip the cutscene because I love you. And another super interesting skip you guys can go for is dashing into that floor trap, which launches you up there and lets you not have to wait on the little force field. Definitely one of my favorite mini skips in the game, and I just go ahead and finish off this route here with the next area containing some really cool movement tech using the meat hook. Basically, if you weapon wheel in a meat hook while you're going to the side, you'll get a ton of speed because of the way it works, and it's actually enough speed to fly straight to the end of the level. And I don't really feel bad about this one because there really isn't any serious combat going on, it's just a bunch of incidental stuff anyway. So now that we're here, we can go ahead and arm break our way into this cutscene and hop into the final door before the boss. But because we broke the level, this thing doesn't go up, and I get stuck on it for a while, and end up having to do a bunch of intended parkour that I should have been able to avoid by just jumping over it. So that's fun. But with the power of editing, we're able to move on to the Doom Hunter boss, and you'll see right away I try to smack him and do nothing because I forgot to pre-charge a blood punch, which really sucks. So I have to play this fight a lot slower than I'm used to. Normally in the speedrun we just stack up a bunch of staggers and a blood punch and we insta-melt him. So it's actually been a while since I seriously fought him before, and so I go ahead and just chainsaw this guy to get some of my stuff back, and I'm just using a bunch of heat blasts to stagger him into some shotgun shots because the shotgun is the highest damaging weapon against him. All you have to do is point it at his sled and be close enough for it to do damage. The only problem is that he has a really scary melee attack. Another thing to note is once you knock this guy out of his wheelchair, he starts spamming heavies at you, so you want to finish off his second phase really quickly, and
Such a pity. We were just getting started. I expected more from the great city. Such a pity. We were just getting started. I expected more from Such a pity. We were just getting started. I expected more from the I expected more.
But eventually I grow a brain and just go and get a blood punch right away before doing the fight, and here's how it goes.
run for my...
So back at base after that fight, we're ready to go and pick up the ballista real eagerly, as you can see by the movement speed. And the ballista is the last weapon we're going to be picking up. You know, I just can't seem to think of any other weapons in the entire game that there possibly could be that I don't already have. But with that picked up, we don't really have anything else to do, so we'll go ahead and boost our way into the Super Gore nest. And I went ahead and brought us to the first fight of the level, which is a pretty big fight, but you're giving a lot of space, so I didn't have too many issues with it. The first thing I'm doing is waiting for the Mank to hop up here before taking him out with a nice SSG PB combo. Then I'm going to rush the guy down here using a frag grenade, followed up by some PB rockets after he's been staggered, and he'll go down pretty quick for that as well. But once I got close, I used the SSG. Then we have the third guy, and now that I'm a little bit low on ammo, I'm going to go for a chainsaw on him, and then finish off everything else I need to spawn the carcass, which comes up in this area where I just threw that barrel. And once he spawns, I take him out with a ballista shot, which actually happens to splash the barrel. I didn't even plan for that, but that was pretty cool. After we kill him, some revenants spawn up top, so now I'm setting up to go for them. In general, it's a bad idea to get stuck down here, so I want to get out of here as fast as possible, and then I go for some more of the world's slowest lock-on burst ever, and we're spammed with the last wave of heavies for the fight, which is a few prowlers, a caco, and some snakes. And also hell knights, forgot about them. But this is really nothing we can't handle, so eventually we take them down, and then we are put into the cutscene and can take on the Pinky. And I actually go for the glory kill setup that I'm used to doing in 100%, but obviously it's just absolutely meaningless here, but this is it. It's pretty much just 3 PB rocket combos, and they always go into a glory kill. So I get that, and then I'm ready to move on to the next weapon mod, and for this one we are going to be taking the Destroyer Blade. And this mod, while it's definitely one of the most powerful in the game, it is another one that is very heavily reliant on the upgrades, and that gives me quite the hard time in similar ways that the lock-on burst does. While it's still very strong, it doesn't get the increased charge speed that I'm used to, so my timing is off in a lot of the cases where I'm using it, and it makes me die quite a bit during the run. You'll see. But for this fight, we start off with the Dread Knight, and then we go and spawn camp this spider right here, literally at 1 health, but no big deal, didn't panic. And we're able to take him down without dying, and with that we get some health back, which is really nice. Then I can lock on burst this Dread Knight, which takes them down very quickly, but unfortunately some of the rockets miss, so I finish him off with a little ballista shot there. And with those down, that's all the heavies, and I go for a D-Blade here and die, just because I'm not used to the timing without upgrades, because I literally always fully upgrade it whenever I get it. So now I get to do that fight again, but it really wasn't that hard of a fight, I just messed it up. So I'll go ahead and cut back to where we were, and we can go ahead and take out the Dread Knight again. This time I do actually make use of the D-Blade properly, and I'm able to kill a bunch of stuff with it. But man, is that charge rate ever really slow. But with these guys taken out, we can go ahead and move on to the first buff totem room of the game, which is also probably one of the hardest. And the reason it's so hard is it's because it's the only buff totem in the base game that you aren't able to just immediately go and take out. So you actually have to fight empowered enemies in this part, and while it's not too many and it's very manageable, that alone pretty much makes it the hardest one just because you can ignore everything in other ones. As you can see, I screw up getting the buff totem just because I get lost a little bit, but after you kill the initial enemies, you can just ignore all of these guys until you find the buff totem, and it will just continuously respawn them until you kill the buff totem, so that's kind of what you want to do if you end up in that situation. And even with the buff totem being literally the last room I cleared, I was still able to take out the buff totem, and now I'm going to turn and hit a nice little D-Blade here to take some stuff out. And I nearly get killed here, but I am able to recover with some Flame Belch and some low health kills for health. Then I hit a chainsaw on one of the last few enemies, and we're able to leave the area. And we'll walk for a little bit, but we are going to move on to the quad damage arena. And this one gave me a little bit of trouble. And I also take the Equipment Fiend rune here, which is actually the only way for us to improve the cooldown on our equipment, which is extremely helpful because normally you have other ways of doing it and you don't really need it. But since we have no upgrades, it's actually pretty useful, and I go ahead and put it on at this point instead of Savagery, which I honestly only took in the first place because it's just what you do in the speedrun and I'm used to it. But in the quad damage arena, I actually have quite a bit of trouble. and just like that we're able to clear out the arena, probably the hardest in the mission, so the rest should be pretty smooth sailing. And with that, I'll go ahead and cut to the next fight since there isn't really anything different about the movement in this, and I'm just going to hop through with bunny hops, and that's not really anything new to you guys at this point. But of course, not before almost accidentally grabbing another sentinel crystal. So at this point we are ready to move on to some more incidental combat, but some stuff did kind of happen here, so I thought I'd go ahead and show it. You might not have seen it, but there was a snake there, so I just used a destroyer blade, and then I almost got killed by this shotgun guy. They really kill you so quickly in this game, it's ridiculous. But with that, I'll show you guys how I handled the Dread Knight and 2 carcasses in this spot, just because they can be a little bit tricky in the tight spaces here. Pretty much I shotgun him off of spawn and kill this guy with a shield explosion, and then I press the button while I'm waiting for the Dread Knight to push me, where I then freeze bomb and do a PB/SSG combo on him. After taking him out, I head towards the hidden weapon mod, and we are going to be taking the Arbalest mod for the Ballista because it is super good. Basically both of the mods on the Ballista are very good for very different reasons. After that we head outside to the industrial area, and this is actually entirely skippable, and you can even skip it doing 100% because this actually does not give you any combat rating for clearing the area. So I decided to just be fast and not go for the buff totem, which is a little bit scary, but I'm not that worried since if I die, I die. It's not Ultra Nightmare anyway. And then I just do whatever you want to call this. So with that embarrassing death out of the way, we can get through this transition now. And while I am, I thought I would explain to you guys why this video ended up being so long. Most of my videos I can cut down pretty significantly. We're talking like a 4-hour video down to like 15 minutes. But Doom is very different from other games because it's almost all high action. So it's really hard to just find stuff to cut out that's not interesting, whereas with games like Destiny, there's plenty of downtime that I can cut out. But if any of you guys are curious, it took me just shy of 4 hours to do this entire run. So there is still quite a bit of downtime removed. Anyway, we're now on to the next fight, and this one is pretty easy. It's just a couple of spiders to take out. Although something to note is that once you kill the last spider, all of the fodders almost immediately despawn, so you want to get a chainsaw done before that, which is why you kind of see me wasting some time towards the end of the fight. But other than that, there isn't really much to this fight, so I just go around and take down things where I can, and we'll be ready to get on out of this level here once we finish the fight. So now we're on to the escape part, and this part is honestly really easy if you have even the slightest bit of speed tech. It's honestly easy even without it, but once you add in stuff like ballista boosting and b-hopping, it's just not even fair. Basically, if you're having trouble with this, all you gotta do is make good use of your equipment. You could throw a frag grenade on this guy, and then use a freeze grenade on the room with 2 mancubuses that's coming up, and you'll pretty much never die on this part. So you'll see me make use of that here, although I kept all my speed anyway and didn't even need it. And you guys can see, even with all of these silly mistakes I'm making, like missing this jump, I'm still going to be getting out of here with plenty of time remaining. So now we're back in the fortress ready to do the next mission, but Vega has to go on a monologue, so I just went ahead and patiently waited here without doing any sort of weird things at all.
I believe Dr. Hayden can help us with our search. I will calibrate the portal to the Ark's command station.
Arc Complex is one of the hardest levels in the game normally as well. It's definitely up there with Cultist Base. However, at this point we do have quite a few more upgrades than we did in Cultist Base, but the difficulty is also quite a bit higher. So in regards to this challenge, this level is much harder than Cultist Base just because we don't have any of those upgrades. In the beginning here we have some small combat encounters, so I'm just doing some basic combos to take down the heavies, and I do go for a nice little D-blade here. Since we're in such small tight hallways, it is a super effective weapon choice. But I do still have to be mindful of having such a long wind-up for it, because if you guys did forget, one of the upgrades for the D-Blade is reducing its time to charge up. Regardless, the basic idea here is that we can take out all of the enemies and then that spawns a Revenant, and at first I start going for the challenge before realizing I have literally no reason to do it, and go ahead and just move on. In this spot I'm able to hit another nice little D-Blade taking out a Hell Knight, and then this Mancubus hops up, and you see what happens. The game should absolutely feel bad for making me pause this song. Anyway, we're back, and this time we hit the chainsaw proper, and we have no problems. What I like to do after taking out the guys up here is hop down into the spot here, and I'm able to hit a very nice D-blade as long as everything lines up properly. And with the power of B-hopping, I'm actually maintaining decent movement, but unfortunately I hit the blade on one of the pillars in the middle and end up not taking out either of the snakes, so I just go for my backup using a lock-on burst. And I will just never get over how slow the lock-on burst is without the upgrades. It's absolutely ridiculous. But once we're done with that, we can go in here, miss absolutely nothing, and continue on with the run. In this room, I'm very used to going for a plasma rifle setup to blow up the shields and get the challenge, but in this case I didn't have to do that, so I just got to use a really nice D-blade. And this hallway is yet another one that is very good for the D-blade, so I go ahead and spawn everything in before shooting a D-blade down the hallway, and it brings down damn near everything. And once we're done with that guy, we can clean up whatever I missed, and then move on to the next encounter, where a Revenant breaks through this door once you get close to it. I said a Revenant breaks down this door whenever you get close to it. Come on.
Who's laughing now?
What a well-made game. But with the Revenant through the door, we're now able to take him out and then continue on to the outside area. And I like to lead off this area with a D-blade, so I go ahead and just hop out here with it pre-charged and shoot it through the Mancubus. And I'll just let this combat play for itself. It's a pretty fun one. So with the last heavy down, we can go ahead and move on to the button, which is going to trigger a pinky to jump through the window and break it open, allowing us into the next area. But that takes a while, so I'll just cut to it. And this is where we are introduced to the Cyber Mancubus, but not before we have a bunch of stuff spawn in our way that we need to deal with first. You can see that I'm playing super aggressive, so I can make good use of the super shotgun's instant stagger on everything as long as you're close to it, and it ends up paying off for me as I'm able to keep my health and armor up pretty high. So with this area cleaned up, we're going to go ahead and grab the fuel here so we have 2, and there is another fuel behind the Cybermank spawn that I'm going to grab so that we can take him out with a chainsaw, because these guys are super tanky. And with him down, he's the major enemy of the fight here, and now we just have some more stuff that we're used to, so I don't really have any specific points about this fight here, it's just another big fight. And these are going to start becoming more common as we get farther into the game, with fights towards the very end of the game taking upwards of 10 minutes, like the first one on Icon of Sin. And just to make that even worse, since I'm not able to take ammo upgrades like I normally can to get BFG refills, we're going to have to do even more of those fights manually than normal. Although that's not really in play right now because we don't have the BFG. But if you guys are interested in how I actually made this video, the first step I did was cutting up all the clips that I wanted to show and putting music timed appropriately with them. Then from there, I'm going back and voicing over all of the parts I think need explanation, and leaving open the rest, so that way the entire video is somewhat engaging with matching music and such. Now with that fight out of the way, we're onto this little bit of incidental combat, and I just go ahead and line up this very nice D-blade that I normally can't do in 100% because I have to get an external combustion tick on the soldier who I need to shoot with the plasma rifle. But with that area finished off, we can now go into this room which spawns a ton of fodder and do a very satisfying move to fill up our health and armor. And now we're into the airplane where I set up my D-blade that takes out everything, but because the freeze bomb isn't upgraded, the Mancubus doesn't actually stay frozen long enough and he ends up doing a bunch of damage to me. But we do survive and we can move on to the next major fight, which is in this outdoor area following the airplane. And this one ends up giving me some trouble, so I'll go ahead and let you guys see how it went. So yeah, I got killed right at the end by one fucking fodder. Power of editing, woo, we're done. Yay. Here we have some more incidental combat before we move on to the next real arena, which is going to be Mario's restaurant. And this place is kind of terrifying normally, but honestly, being given access to the Berserk power-up makes this room kind of easier than most of the other rooms. So despite it being very filled with heavies, since I already know how to make use of the Berserk power-up, the challenge isn't really making this room a whole lot harder. So for anybody who is struggling with this room, I'll show you guys a decent way to make use of the Berserk power-up. Basically, you want to take out the spider and all the mancubuses in the room before you take it. That's the idea. So I'll just let it play out. And as quick as that, the room is over and we're ready to leave now. And I'm almost able to use the Berserk on the Pinky here, but not quite. But it doesn't really matter since we can just freeze him and take him out this way. But with that out of the way, now we can go on to do a pretty big skip. And this one is probably the most well-known in the game and very casual friendly. There's a bunch of ways to do it here. I used a Yeet Hook, but you could also just use a Ballista Boost. And now we're ready to take on the Marauder. I thought the Marauder would be harder than it ended up being, simply because the Marauder is probably the biggest thing that makes you use quick swapping in the game. You really don't have to do it anywhere else, but you absolutely need to get 2 high power shots off on the Marauder every phase, or you're just never going to kill him. Regardless, we're able to get 3 shots off using an SSG PB combo, so he ends up going down in just 3 phases anyway. That said, they're going to give us some problems later, but not this time.
You can't just shoot a hole into the surface of Mars.
So now that we're out of the elevator on Mars Core, we can get started with the level, and in this area it is completely optional to fight the enemies here. They don't give you any combat rating either, but I go ahead and just move on to the Baron room and hit him with a D-Blade and then some random barrage of weapons fire. Since he's on his own, he's not really that big of a deal, but the Baron can actually be pretty scary whenever there's multiple of them. And now we're on to the first big fight of the mission. The setup here is that I'm going to run up and kill this spider, then a Kako and a Cybermank spawns, although the Cybermank is pretty far away, so I just pretty easily take care of the Kako demon using a frag shot and then an SSG blast. And now I want to close in on the Cybermank because he is the next big threat, and I just hit him with a triple chainsaw because we have one from starting the mission. Then I apparently didn't kill the Kako, even though I swear I saw him fall out of the sky, and he comes back to bite me. So this time I go to put the absolute style on the Cybermank just because I love doing this whenever I can. And yeah, that's always fun. So I go run away and grab the fuel before going back in for the chainsaw. I cut it out, but I chainsawed an imp because I needed ammo. So if I had the ammo upgrade I'm supposed to, then I wouldn't have needed that ammo though. Also, that Kako 100% wouldn't have killed me if I had more health upgrades, because Kakos don't really hurt towards the end of the game, but at the beginning they absolutely destroy you. So for us, obviously they just destroy us for the entire game. But at this point we're basically done with the fight, so we're going to go ahead and cut on to the next one. And this is where we are introduced to the Pain Elemental, although we don't really get to see much of him because we just take him down quickly with some Arbalest shots. And after he goes down, a Dread Knight spawns, but I kind of let him get away, but I find him eventually. And we hit him with a nice lock-on burst that takes absolute years to charge up, which always puts them into a glory kill. Then we get a Doom Hunter to finish off the fight, and once we kill the Doom Hunter, the imps will stop spawning infinitely, and we'll be good to finish the level. Then we move on to this tunnel, and we get access to the BFG once we enter this cutscene and skip it. So I'll do that and move on to the next arena, which is just behind this door that is going to open. This fucking game, man, I swear. Anyway. I thought I'd show you guys a little bit of the transition just because this is a super fun mission for movement, as you can see, and I do only the best maneuvers here on the Lazy KB channel. So, moving on. Now we can hook on into this arena, which we use a BFG shot on against 2 Barons, and I very recently learned that I should be actually letting the BFG shot hit something near the Barons, so that way the splash damage hits them. But in this case, I just let it fly off the map for maximum tendril damage. But if you do it perfectly, you can actually BFG in a way that insta-kills them, so that's kind of something to note. Anyway, because we didn't kill the Barons quickly, we do have to deal with a little bit of water spawns, but it's no big deal here, we're able to take it on. This really isn't the craziest fight once you add a BFG into the mix. It was meant to be your first time dealing with 2 Barons at the same time. And now we're ready to move on to the next open area where I'm going to hook past most of it, but I do remember to grab the BFG ammo on my way and do whatever this weird movement was here. I have no idea where I got that bounce from, but I'll take it. And now we can move on to this place, which we normally have to spend some time in on 100% to do the Slayer Gate and some secrets, but here we could just jump down the hole in the end and move on to the hell part. And while I'm doing this walking, I thought I'd ask you guys to leave a comment if you are enjoying this style of video, as this is actually my first time doing a challenge run on YouTube. So any kind of feedback or just letting me know you enjoyed it means a whole lot. Getting into this fight, if you BFG before going into the fight, you can actually trap a Baron under the map where he dies, and it also just kind of skips the first part of the fight, and now we can move on to the second half normally. Normally you would use a BFG shot in the speedrun, but I want to save a little bit of BFG ammo for the next fight as I'm worried it might be a little bit difficult. So here's how it played out. And now we're on to the story level. There's no combat until the boss fight, so... And we're at the Gladiator fight. And I thought that this was going to be challenging just because this boss can be pretty tough on Nightmare, especially if you haven't practiced it. But it ended up going really well for me. In fact, I didn't get hit a single time during the first phase. And also, can we talk about how good this boss is? This has to be one of my favorite bosses in all of gaming across any game out there. Like, he's got the perfect amount of mechanics to make him interesting and not just a boring bullet sponge, but he also isn't just annoying and health gated like everything is in some other games like Destiny. In general, he's just super satisfying to fight once you're familiar with his attacks. But that's basically all I had to say, so I'll just let the fight play out now. So now we're back at base, and we have to deal with this group of fodder for some reason, because I guess that's the best the Calm Maker had, and we can go ahead and move on into Taurus Nabad. So the first fight here is bringing back the Marauder. I think they gave us a bit of a break from him after his introduction in Arc during Mars Core, but now he's back, and he's here quite a lot in this level actually. Regardless, we take him down with the same combo we used in Arc, and I do make some use of a couple of cool tricks here, like the frag grenade to get a free stagger, as well as getting a lovely foot ballista. And if you don't know what that means, that's when you shoot a ballista on the ground next to him, and if he has the right amount of health, it will always stun him even if he's not giving you a green light. So we're able to take him down, and it is a little bit close because of the dog, but that's the fight. Now we're ready to move on to the introduction of the archvile, and this fight is super scary until you actually figure out how it works. But once you know where the archviles spawn, you can finish this fight off super quickly. But this challenge does introduce a huge wrench into the works when it comes to archviles. Normally you can just hit them with a freeze bomb and 2 lock-on bursts and it takes them down instantly, but you'll see here that that absolutely does not work without upgrades. The lock-on burst is way too slow and the freeze bomb just doesn't last long enough. Regardless, we're able to get this one taken care of with some cleanup, but that was with good RNG because if the archvile felt like it, he could just turn and completely destroy me, and we'll see that later. Regardless, I'll skip past the parkour and move on to the next fight. Since this video is getting to be pretty long, I'm going to start doing that a lot more and just kind of going fight to fight. So this is a room I want to BFG on for sure because it's really scary, and whenever you do a BFG at the start, you're left with nothing but the Doom Hunter, so we can just take him out with a blood punch and a grenade, and we'll be good to finish off the fight. And moving on to the next fight in the sewers, we're going to be hopping in with a D-Blade charged, but you'll see that this fight gives me a little bit of trouble. But regardless, we can go ahead and try it again, and this time I'm sure it'll work out for me. All I have to do is change absolutely nothing after all. This room is kind of scary just because it's very tight, and you get some pretty scary demons for tight spaces, including the Snake and Barons. And towards the end of the fight, we also get an archvile, but I decide to use a BFG on it, so he ends up not being too big of a deal. And after that, we'll move on to the next outside fight, which includes another Marauder. This room I also decide to use a BFG on because there's a bunch of heavies here all at once, and there's kind of a little amount of space to actually work with here, especially when you add in the fact that the Marauder comes in halfway through the fight and not after you've taken out all of the heavies. This area is also just like a pain in the ass for fighting the Marauder on, so I'll let you guys see how it played out. And the next big fight is actually entirely skippable just using some basic movement. So I just hook off of that guy straight towards the door at the end, skipping all of the upgrades in that area. And with that, we just have a bunch of transition before going on to the final fight. So we can go ahead and hop into that, and this one ended up being pretty difficult for me, so I'll go ahead and let you guys see how it went. And with that out of the way, we can move on to Necroval now, and this is kind of the final chapter of the game, and it really shows because things significantly ramp up now that we have the Crucible. But I thought I'd let you guys see me struggling to jump up here before moving on to the next fight. And I actually hit a beautiful lurch hop here, and I'm able to just jump into all the resources at the end here before getting into the quad damage fight where the game introduces the Tyrant. And the Tyrant actually has a very helpful blurb from the game itself on how to counter him. The solution is that you want to shoot him until he dies. Honestly, amazing advice for taking on any demon if you ask me. And with this fight done, we can move on to the next mini-boss fight, which is the Kali boss. The strat here is to just do an Arbalest shot followed up by a rocket on all 4 of these eyes, and then you're able to leave the encounter. But I take a break to chainsaw this pain elemental using the triple chainsaw we got at the start of the mission, before hopping back down and finishing off the last eye to get out of the room. And now for the next fight, a great example of how archviles can just completely kick my ass because I don't have any upgrades. Okay, let's go ahead and watch the actual fight now. There isn't really a lot to specifically talk about this fight, other than that there is an archvile that spawns towards the end of it. But as somebody who does 100% speedrun the game, I already know every single spawn point of every single archvile in this game, so I do have a pretty decent advantage against them, but without the free way to melt them just using rockets and a freeze bomb, I do have to get pretty creative with how I take them out. Even though looking back at it, I definitely could have just spent crucible charges on them. But hey, that's alright, free content, right? This just serves as a lesson to all the kids watching. Never learn anything, stay stuck in your ways. And that basically finishes up this fight. The next room has a buff totem in it, but you can actually make use of the meat hook to take it down right away. And while normally you would BFG this room, I ended up not doing that to hold on to my BFG ammo, because I'm not able to take an ammo crystal on the next level to refill my ammo. But this room ends up not being too bad, just using our full set of weapons. And in the speedrun we normally just BFG'd this room because we had an excess anyway. After clearing that room, we have to fight a marauder in this hallway along with a snake, and I have no idea how I survived this, you'll see what I mean. And now we can push this button and move on to the final fight of the level. And in this room we have a double Doom Hunter fight, as well as a ton of heavies to deal with as well. So definitely a pretty scary room. And you could see that I even end up dying to it because there is just a ton of stuff going on. But then I remember, I'm playing Doom Eternal, and this game is not a shooter game, it's actually a flight sim. So I just meat hook up here and hit the end level trigger by punching this statue. But Necroval Part 2 would not be so kind to me. I start this fight off by using a D-Blade on all of the fodders, and now we can move on to the first combat arena of the mission. This one gave me a little bit of trouble, but overall it wasn't too bad despite being a rather massive fight, since we are given a overdrive power up, which gives us a moment of very high speeds as well as infinite ammo, which is super strong when mixed with like the lock-on burst, which almost feels as good as the upgraded lock-on burst whenever you have it. But that's all I have to say for this fight, so I'll just let it play out with the epic music going on. And with the fight over, we can go ahead and move on to the next arena, which is really close to this arena actually. The Necroval maps are super fast overall anyway, but when you're cutting out all of the time in between, they go by really fast. And this room ended up giving me a lot more trouble than the last two, mostly because you have to deal with an archvile and a marauder all on the same checkpoint. And once again, I'll just let you guys see how it ended up going. And now for the final fight of the level. There seriously was no major areas that I couldn't just run past up until this point. And I tried to do a trick with the freeze bomb and just missed it and accepted my fate. And yeah, this fight ended up having a lot of deaths. And I realized what I was kind of missing with this fight after a couple more deaths, and that was movement. So I started employing some absolutely wacky movement, and it ended up working out for me. I'll show you what I mean. And that's Necroval. Now I can stand on this button and go punch some things, and we can move on to the next mission, that being Urdak. And I went ahead and skipped to the first combat arena because there's a bunch of movement at the start. And at first I started fighting things, getting ready for the fight, because this fight basically spawns on a timer, but then I realized I could just do this. Later. That saved me a BFG shot. I know some people might not like me skipping combat encounters, especially tracked ones, but honestly I'm okay with it because this was a specific area that you're able to do this, and not just me using some insanely broken trick to skip every combat arena. You guys have seen at this point that there is plenty of combat, and we have plenty more coming up in this mission as well. And this one actually ended up giving me quite a bit of trouble, and I had the usual death on it that I had to take before I figured out how I could handle it properly with no upgrades. Even just about 3 hours into the run, I was absolutely not used to the timing of combos on this slow handling on the weapons. But after the death, we can go ahead and try again, and this time we'll get it done. So with the barrier now down, we can punch this thing and move on to the next arena. For whatever reason, this area lets you leave before finishing off all the heavies, which is kind of unusual. Regardless, we get out of there and we go ahead and crucible this Baron. But if I was faster, I could have actually just jumped through the door before it closed again. But I just used the crucible to be nice and fast. And now we're on to the next arena, which does include a marauder fight. But all the fights in Urdak aren't too bad because you're given the Maker Drones, which whenever you pop their head, drop 200 health each. So they literally refill my health bar multiple times over every time I kill one, which makes the fights kind of easy. And now we're on to this archvile arena, which is normally super easy because the archvile has literally nothing backing it up, but he was still a pain in the ass. But with that fight done, I'll go ahead and show you guys some of the transition just because the video is going by super quickly. But I am able to hit a very interesting ramp jump here and hop on over to the next fight. And this fight was very brutal. I ended up using a BFG on it and dying several times. Here's how it went. But first, I just have to show you guys this absolutely insane get down Mr. President a Prowler did. He literally got in front of me like frame perfect when the shot came out of the gun. It was ridiculous. Like you didn't even see him in the video. But I knew he was there because of the purple flash. But really, despite the BFG shot totally failing, I was still able to get through the majority of all the enemies. And at this point, I'm just left with nothing but a Revenant, so it should be pretty easy. Just pretend I made it through, I definitely did. In the next fight, we have a buff totem, and this is another very big fight. But once again, there really isn't a whole lot to say about it, it's just like all the other big fights. So I'm just gonna let it play out with the music in the background. And with that out of the way, we can do some fun movement on our way to the Con Maker as the final part of this mission. And normally the Con Maker is an absolute joke, and I kind of went into this very confident that it would be easy, but I kind of had some trouble. I'll let you guys see how it was. But then I remembered this boss fight actually is easy, and I just needed to stop being bad at the game. And once I did that, it really wasn't too bad. The boss is super weak to lock-on burst, and not having the upgrades for it hurts, but still, it's not too bad, so I'll just cut to the good parts.
Hey, you. Finally awake.
And with her bullshit taken care of, now we can move on to the Icon of Sin, the final level of the game. This level has some absolutely insane fights going on, including this one which I alluded to earlier in the video, which took me almost 10 minutes to do just the successful clear of it. That was without all the deaths I had in between. And we have an amazing song for an amazing level. I'll let you guys just see how this fight went. And with this fight done, I'll move on to the first BFG use of the level, and we actually end up using 2 in this building because it's such a crazy fight. So I'll run over here and stomp on this buff totem, and then I'm basically going to run past everything to the rooftop before using another BFG. We have to BFG at this early point so that we kill the enemies required to move that wall, but then we could just do a hook and get past these guys before making our way up to the roof and using another BFG to clear out all the heavies and some of the guys through the building as well. But it's not that easy because we get a marauder fight in this area as well, and really there isn't a lot to say up until the actual final boss fight. All the rooms are just absolutely filled to the chalk with heavy demons, so I'll just let you guys see how I dismantled them.
Learn nothing. Stay stuck in your ways.
And that was the final fight before the Icon of Sin. And once again, normally the Icon of Sin is pretty easy with all the upgrades, but he ended up giving me a lot of problems during this run. In fact, he took me almost an hour to take down all on his own. So I was actually able to first try the first phase of the Icon of Sin, which means you're probably wondering where all the difficulty came that I was talking about before the fight. And well, that really doesn't come until the second phase of the fight, but for now all we need to do is dodge this attack before moving on to the next part. Or get hit and be at 5 health, only saved by health gate, and go into the next fight one shot. I got decently far in my first attempt despite coming in with only 5 health, but once I died in that run, I had a much harder time getting anywhere in the fight. Some runs got close to the end, but I died in all of them. And most of the deaths could be attributed to the lack of upgrades because I was either not killing the boss fast enough, or didn't have enough health to tank attacks I normally could. One thing that surprisingly affected me a lot was actually the draw speed of the Crucible, which I wasn't even sure was affected by that mod, but it definitely is now that I have used it without it. I ended up spending almost 40 minutes dying on this encounter, and it was easily the longest time I spent on any part of the run. But the longer I spent on it, the better I got at it, and eventually, I got a run.
and your will their sword. You remain unbroken, for your fight is eternal.